My name is Patricia Hill. I was 56 years old when it happened, when I was accused of stealing and thrown out like I was nothing. I had worked as a nanny for the Wilson family in suburban Oregon. For 6 years, I took care of their 3 children, from diapers to bedtime stories, from first steps to first words. I taught them right from wrong, held them when they cried, and loved them like my own flesh and blood. I thought that meant something. I thought I was part of their family. Just like one of us, Mrs. Wilson would often say. But people like the Wilsons don't see you. Not really. When they say family, they mean as long as you're useful. It was a Tuesday. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and little Kate had just gone down for her afternoon nap. I walked into the kitchen, ready to fix myself a cup of tea, a small luxury I gave myself when the house was finally quiet. I reached for the kettle when I heard the front door slam. "Patricia!" Mr. Wilson's voice cut through the hallway, like a knife. Sharp. Cold. I stepped out of the kitchen, drying my hands on my apron. "Yes, sir?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, eyes narrowed, lips tight. Behind him, Mrs. Wilson stood with her arms crossed and her jaw clenched. I looked past them and saw Officer Daniels, the neighborhood cop, standing just inside the doorway. My stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Mr. Wilson held up an envelope. $500 in cash. It was in my desk drawer. Now it's gone. I blinked, confused. I haven't been in your office." "We didn't say you were," Mrs. Wilson snapped, "but you're the only one here during the day." They didn't raise their voices. They didn't scream. They didn't need to. Their words were measured and calm even. But behind every syllable was a cold accusation. "You did it." Officer Daniels cleared his throat. "Mind if we check your bag, ma'am?" I stood frozen, humiliated. My purse sat on the counter. I hadn't even touched it since I arrived that morning. They didn't find the money, because of course I didn't take it. But that didn't matter. Mrs. Wilson's voice was icy. "Patricia, I think it's best if we end your employment effective immediately. We'll pay you for the week, but we need you to leave now." That was it. No proof, no discussion, no defense, just gone. I walked out of that house in the rain, heart pounding, my hands shaking as I clutched my umbrella. The same umbrella little Henry had insisted on decorating with stickers just 2 weeks earlier. I didn't even take my coat from the hallway. Didn't cry. Not yet. But I knew as the door slammed behind me that something inside me had cracked, and I wasn't going to let it stay broken. After I was fired, I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I sat in my car, parked 3 blocks away from the Wilsons' perfect white house, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to the earth. My hands were trembling. My chest burned, but my eyes stayed dry. I wasn't going to give them my tears. Instead, I gave myself 1 quiet hour, just one, to feel the sting, to replay every moment. Every time I'd cleaned up their mess, every late night I stayed to rock their children to sleep while they attended charity galas, every birthday I remembered when they forgot. And then I opened the glove box and pulled out the tiny black box I kept tucked away, my personal insurance policy. Nannycam.small, discreet, hidden inside a stuffed elephant I kept in the corner of the nursery. I hadn't placed it there to spy. At first, it was just for safety, in case the kids fell or I needed to prove I wasn't negligent. But over the years, it had captured more than just naps and snack time. It had captured secrets, conversations between Mr. and Mrs. Wilson that were never meant to be heard. Their financial struggles, his affair with someone from the office, her drinking, and yes, her comment 2 weeks ago. We'll just say it was Patricia. She doesn't have the money to fight us. I remember freezing when I first heard it, rewinding it, listening again and again until the bile rose in my throat. That was when I moved a second camera into the home office, disguised in a picture frame on the shelf. I had everything, but I didn't take it to the police. Not yet. People like the Wilsons didn't just ruin your job, they ruined your reputation. I knew if I fought them now, it would become a messy scandal. They'd paint me as a bitter, aging woman desperate for revenge. And society would believe them. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. For the next 2 years, I worked odd jobs, assisted living homes, hospice care, night shifts. Places no one cared who you were, just whether you showed up on time and didn't complain. I kept my head down. I saved every penny, and I watched. From a distance, I watched the Wilsons. Their kids grew older. Their parents, especially Mrs. Wilson's mother, began to decline. Alzheimer's, mobility issues, a ticking clock, and I waited until the day. I saw the job posting, seeking full-time care manager for Silver Meadows, a premium elder care residence. It wasn't just any facility. It was the one I had quietly invested in with a few other women I'd met through my night shifts. All of us overlooked, underestimated, but not stupid. We pooled our savings, bought in as silent partners, and started rebuilding it from the ground up. Now it was expanding. And I wasn't just applying. I was stepping in as director, and I knew, eventually, the Wilsons would come knocking, because karma doesn't ring the doorbell. It waits inside. The lobby with a clipboard and a professional smile. The lobby at Silver Meadows was quiet that morning. Soft jazz played through the overhead speakers, and sunlight spilled through the skylight onto polished floors and fresh orchids. We designed it that way, not to look like a facility, but like a second chance. For residents, for staff. For me, I was reviewing the new intake logs when the receptionist buzzed me. "Patricia, there's a family here for a tour. Walk in. Says it's urgent." I took a breath, smoothed my blazer, and stepped out. There they were, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, a few more wrinkles, a little more gray, but unmistakably them, and they didn't recognize me. Not at first. I walked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. Welcome to Silver Meadows. I'm Patricia Hill, the care director here. How can I help you today?" Mrs. Wilson looked me in the eye and didn't flinch. "Yes, we're looking for immediate placement for my mother. She's had some falls. We're told your facility is the best." I nodded. "We do our best." Mr. Wilson leaned in. "Do you have private suites? She's used to a certain level of comfort." I wanted to laugh. The man who once had me escorted off his property was now asking for comfort. But I said nothing. I just gestured toward the hallway. "Follow." Me. We toured the gardens, the therapy rooms, the memory care wing. I showed them everything, all the results of 3 years of rebuilding, of reinvesting, of quietly turning pain into power. As we walked, Mrs. Wilson tilted her head. "I'm sorry. You look familiar. Have we met before?" I paused, just for a moment. Then I smiled. "I used to work with children." Her face went pale. I saw it hit her, like a slow-moving train of guilt and memory. Mr. Wilson looked confused. Then it clicked for him, too. His eyes widened and he opened his mouth as if to speak. But I didn't let him. "I'll give you a moment," I said gently. "You can meet me in my office when you're ready to discuss terms." I left them standing in the hallway, surrounded by polished oak and scentless lilies, a far cry from the rain-soaked porch where they'd once thrown me out without a second thought. Back in my office, I pulled out the file, the video, the audio. The statements they didn't know I had. I didn't plan to use it, not unless I had to, because this wasn't about destroying them anymore. This was about making them need me, and watching them squirm under the weight of their own shame. When the Wilsons entered my office, they moved slower, not just physically, emotionally. They looked around the space like it didn't belong to someone like me. Mahogany desk, clean lines, framed certifications, a photo of me shaking hands with a senator during the grand reopening ribbon-cutting ceremony. I saw Mrs. Wilson glance at it, then quickly avert her eyes. I gestured for them to sit. She chose the chair closest to the door. He remained standing. "So," I said calmly, folding my hands, "you're seeking a suite for your mother. How urgent is her condition?" Mrs. Wilson cleared her throat. "She's declining fast. She had 2 falls in the last month. The last one was in the kitchen, broke her wrist. We can't manage it anymore." Mr. Wilson finally sat, resting his elbows on his knees. "We've toured 3 places. Nothing compares to what you've built here." "What I built." He said it like he didn't even hear himself. I tapped my pen lightly on the folder in front of me. I see. Do you have a preferred wing? Memory care? Assisted living or transitional? Assisted, she replied, but with private nurse access. That's an extra cost, I said smoothly. Premium rate. We'll pay it, he said immediately. She's used to having everything a certain way. Mrs. Wilson remained quiet. Her eyes darted around my office. She wouldn't meet mine. I leaned back, letting the silence sit between us a few seconds too long. Then I opened the file drawer beside me and gently slid a thin envelope onto the table. Neither of them touched it. What is that? Mr. Wilson asked, voice cautious. Something I've kept for over 3 years, I said. Insurance, I suppose. He looked at me, then slowly reached for the envelope and opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a printed transcript. Just one paragraph. The part where Mrs. Wilson's voice said, "We'll just say it was Patricia. She doesn't have the money to fight us." His eyes scanned the words. His face changed. Mrs. Wilson went still as stone. I'm not here to destroy your lives, I said softly, sincerely. If I were, you'd already be in court, or worse, on the evening news. What I want is respect and honesty. Mr. Wilson opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not interested in apologies, I said. And I certainly don't need your guilt. What I need is your cooperation and your silence. They exchanged a glance, a fearful one. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, an elderly couple walked hand in hand across the courtyard. Staff nearby offered warm smiles, pushing a wheelchair, adjusting sun hats. This place, this facility, was everything I had poured myself into. The late nights, the endless budgeting, the risks, the side jobs, the private partners who trusted me when no one else would. I made it real. And now the very people who tried to ruin me were asking for my help. You'll be placed on our priority intake list, I said without turning. Your mother will have a private suite. She'll be treated with dignity. Because that's how we care for everyone here, even the families who once treated others as disposable. I turned back to face them. Do we have an understanding? Mrs. Wilson looked pale, small, almost fragile, but she nodded. Yes. After they left, I sat back down at my desk and stared at the closed door for a long time. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. Not exactly. There was no screaming match. No public shaming. Just a quiet shift in power. So subtle most people wouldn't have noticed it. But I noticed. They came to me as equals, left beneath me. That night, as I made my usual rounds through the facility, one of our nurses flagged. Me down. Ms. Hill, there's a new applicant for the kitchen team. Says she used to work for you. I frowned. Did she mention a name? Monica Jennings. I stopped in my tracks. Monica had been the Wilsons' part-time housekeeper. Younger than me, sharper-tongued, and very eager to impress. The last time I saw her, she was whispering with Mrs. Wilson at the top of the stairs, right before I was accused of stealing. I walked down to HR the next morning and reviewed Monica's file. Turns out her marriage had ended. She'd filed for bankruptcy last year. Needed steady work. Interesting how life turned. A week later, the Wilsons moved their mother into Silver Meadows. They tried to keep it low profile. No grand announcements, no family banners. Just a quiet transport van and a frail old woman who barely recognized her own children. I assigned the best nurses to her, not out of kindness, out of principle, because I wanted them to know that even when I had the upper hand, I wouldn't stoop to their level. I wouldn't frame them, humiliate them. I didn't need to. I was already winning, just by standing exactly where I was. But the past has a strange way of staying alive. That evening, I found an envelope slid under my office door. No name. No return address. Inside, a single printed photo. It was from years ago. Me, holding one of the Wilson kids, smiling, hair a mess, apron stained with juice and oatmeal. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "You deserved better." I sat there, holding the photo for a long time. Then I slid it into my top drawer, because I still wasn't done. I didn't see Monica Jennings right away. The application came in, sure. A few typed lines, a clipped resume, and a note about restarting fresh. But it wasn't until I passed the break room and heard that voice, sharp, nasal, a little too loud, that I stopped mid-stride. I mean, come on, how hard can it be? Old folks, soft food, wheelchairs. You just smile and nod. My jaw clenched. I stepped inside. She was leaning over the counter, laughing with one of the younger aides, holding a cup of coffee like she owned the place. Her hair was lighter now, maybe a bleach job to distract from the years. But it was her. She turned and froze. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. I just nodded, slowly. Welcome to Silver Meadows, Monica. Her mouth opened, closed, then forced a tight smile. Ms. Hill, wow. You look great. Thank you. I see you've met our team. She looked around. Yes. Everyone's been very welcoming. Good, I said. We believe in second chances here. Her smile faltered. I walked out, without another word. Later that day, I sat with HR. I want her assigned to the night prep shift, I said calmly. No resident interaction until further review. The HR manager raised an eyebrow. Is there a reason? Call it a probation period, I replied. Her file's a little thin. Let's see if she's committed. What I didn't say was, let's see if she's changed. Back then, Monica had been the Wilsons' favorite mouthpiece. She gossiped, whispered, stirred drama. I never had proof, but I knew in my bones she helped plant that theft rumor, likely thinking it would earn her more hours, more favor. Turns out, betrayal doesn't always lead to promotion. Sometimes it leads to a job scrubbing trays in an elder care kitchen. 3 weeks passed. She showed up on time, kept her head down, barely spoke to me, but I saw the resentment in her eyes, like she hated seeing me here, in charge, respected, thriving. And then, out of nowhere, Mrs. Wilson requested a meeting. I had half a mind to decline, but curiosity got the better of me. She came alone. No pearls, no perfume. Just a worn sweater and eyes that didn't hold their usual fire. Thank you for meeting with me, she said softly. I nodded, offering no smile. What's on your mind? She took a breath. It's about Monica. I raised an eyebrow. Go? Wait, she came to our house recently, said she was working here. She brought up the past. What happened with you? And the money. I leaned back. Interesting. She said she had information, that she was willing to talk. Publicly, if we didn't help her. Financially. Blackmail. I felt my stomach twist. Not in fear, but in something sharper. Disgust. She's desperate, Mrs. Wilson continued. But if she drags this back into the spotlight, it won't just hurt us. It'll affect your reputation too. I stood slowly. My reputation, I said carefully, was already dragged through the mud once. I rebuilt it, brick by brick. I didn't do that to live in fear of someone like Monica. She's unstable, Mrs. Wilson whispered. Vindictive. I gave her a long, cold stare. Then you two have more in common than you think. She flinched. I walked around the desk and handed her a sealed envelope. What is this? She asked. Full transcript of Monica's conversations recorded during her probation shift. She didn't know the staff lounge was monitored, but she made it clear she's lying, and that this is a play for leverage. Mrs. Wilson looked stunned. Why give this to me? Because you're not the target this time. I am. I leaned in slightly, but I don't scare easy anymore. The next morning, Monica didn't show up for her shift. By noon, her contract had been voided. HR said she left a voicemail, something about toxic environments and unfair treatment. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That same week, Silver Meadows received an award from the state, Best Mid-Sized Elder Care Facility in Oregon. I stood at the podium in front of staff, residents, families, and partners, all clapping, cheering, smiling. When I looked into the crowd, I saw Mr. Wilson in the back corner, arms crossed, watching me. He didn't clap, but he didn't leave either. After the ceremony, I stepped outside for air. The sky was soft with late afternoon haze, the kind that makes everything feel suspended in gold. a familiar voice spoke behind me. "You're not the woman I fired." I turned. Mr. Wilson stood beside the railing, hands in his coat pockets. "You're right," I said. "She was naive, grateful, quiet." He nodded. "And now?" "Now?" I tilted my head. "Now I'm just getting started." He gave a faint smile. "Do you hate us?" "No," I said honestly. "But I'll never forget you." He nodded again. "Fair." Then he walked away. That night, I sat in my office with the door locked and poured myself one glass of wine. On the wall was a framed quote I had hung the day I became director. I hadn't looked at it in a while. It read, "Revenge isn't loud. It's success whispered in the halls of the people who once doubted you." And for the first time in a long, long while, I allowed myself a real smile. It started with an email. Subject line, "Strategic Acquisition Interest, Clarion Health Group." At first, I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. But something about the tone, too polished, too clinical, made me pause. Clarion was one of the largest elder care conglomerates on the West Coast. They owned nearly 30 facilities across 6 states. I'd read about them. Sleek branding, massive funding, cold execution, and now they wanted Silver Meadows. The email was short and impersonal. "We've been monitoring your growth trajectory. Your recent state award and increasing occupancy rates align with our long-term portfolio strategy. We'd like to discuss acquisition terms." I stared at the screen, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. They didn't say congratulations. They didn't say you've built something worth admiring. They said you're a number. That afternoon, I called a meeting with my founding partners. 3 women, all older than me, all survivors of the same quiet wars. There was Denise, a former hospice nurse who'd been pushed out when a younger manager decided she was too emotional. There was Lorraine, once a brilliant dietary planner, blacklisted for reporting safety violations. And then there was Alma, soft-spoken, always in beige, who had once managed a private care home until her male boss took credit for her systems, then fired her without severance. Together, we had invested everything into this place. I laid out the offer. They listened. Lorraine spoke first. "Clarion doesn't partner. They swallow." Denise nodded. "We'd lose everything. Control, autonomy, the culture." Alma said nothing. She just stared at her folded hands. "But," I added, "the offer is real, generous, and some of us could use the security." They looked at me. They knew I was talking about Alma, her husband's medical bills, the second mortgage, the quiet panic she never voiced, but we all felt. "We're not obligated to sell," I said, "but we should talk." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls of Silver Meadows, checking rooms, smiling softly at the night staff, pausing by the meditation garden where wind chimes whispered in the dark. This place wasn't just brick and policy. It was memory. It was me. And yet, I had built it to protect, not to fight. Could I really take on a giant like Clarion? Would they find my old story? Would they smear me, label me unstable, unprofessional, emotionally driven? Would they dig up Monica, the Wilsons, or worse? Would they offer Alma just enough to make her say yes? The next morning, Clarion sent a formal offer, 7 figures, upfront, clean, tempting. I stared at the numbers, but all I could hear was Mrs. Wilson's voice. "Years ago, we'll just say it was Patricia. She doesn't have the money to fight us." She had been right, back then, but not now. Now I did have the money, the power, the platform. What I didn't have was the voice. Not yet. I had always played quiet revenge, discreet wins, silent rises. But maybe, just maybe, the time had come to speak. I called a friend, Janice, a retired journalist who had once written for the Oregonian. We'd met at a fundraiser for elder care reform last year and stayed loosely in touch. She picked up on the second ring. "Patricia? I want to tell a story," I said. Mine. There was a pause. Are you sure? No, I admitted. But I'm tired of people like me being invisible. The article ran a week later, front page of the Sunday Human Interest section. From fired nanny to care director, the silent rebuilding of Patricia Hill. It told the whole story, the accusation, the fallout, the years of rebuilding, the rise of Silver Meadows. Names were changed, except mine. The piece was honest, raw, careful, but it didn't beg for pity. It owned the journey. That morning, my inbox flooded, former clients, old coworkers, women I'd never met sharing their own stories, and an hour later, another email from Clarion, shorter this time. Given recent developments, we are withdrawing our offer. Best of luck in your continued operations. In the following days, something shifted. Local news picked up the story, then regional blogs, then a podcast on women-led businesses invited me for an interview. Suddenly, Patricia Hill wasn't just a care director. She was a symbol, a woman who had been discarded and chose not to disappear. And people noticed. Applications surged. Silver Meadows' waitlist doubled in a month. A small private donor, a woman in Seattle who had watched her own mother suffer in a careless facility, offered to help fund a second location, and Alma, she cried in my office. I was ready to sell, she admitted. I was so scared. But when I read your story, I realized something. What? That this place, it's not just our second chance. It's theirs. Every woman who walks in here looking for care or work or just a little dignity. That night, I stayed late. My office was quiet, but my heart was loud. I looked at the newspaper clipping on the desk. Me, holding a resident's hand, smiling, not bitter, not hardened, just seen. For the first time, the world didn't hear my story from someone else's mouth. They heard it from mine, and I knew without doubt that I would never be invisible again. The woman's name was Eleanor Shaw. She was 68. Slight frame, gray hair tied back into a neat bun. She walked with a slight limp and carried a handbag that had clearly seen better decades. Her voice was soft, her eyes downcast, and her application form was missing half the required fields. She came in for a housekeeping role, part-time, flexible hours. My assistant had flagged her file because it didn't meet our minimum qualifications. No recent employment, no references, no digital records beyond a 2005 driver's license renewal. Bring her in anyway, I said. When Eleanor sat across from me, she didn't make eye contact. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan. I offered her tea. She declined. Water. She nodded. We sat in silence for a moment before I asked the first question. Why Silver Meadows? She hesitated. I heard it was a place for people like me. Like you? She finally met my gaze. Forgotten. We talked for 20 minutes. It wasn't a formal interview, more like a slow unraveling. She had spent most of her adulthood life supporting her husband's small repair business, managed his books, answered his phones, cleaned his shop, raised their 2 boys, never asked for credit, never expected it. When he passed suddenly, the business fell apart. The sons moved away. The accounts were empty, no pension, no retirement. She had tried applying elsewhere, chain stores, diners, call centers, but no one called her back. Too old, too quiet, too irrelevant. I just want to work, she said. I want to feel useful again. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out a copy of the newspaper article. Folded. Clean. Have you seen this? I asked. She shook her head. I slid it across the desk. She read the headline. Her brows lifted. Then she scanned the photo, looked up at me, then back down. You... I nodded. I was fired. Accused of something I didn't do. Spent years rebuilding. She blinked. But I'm the director now, yes. Eleanor's hands stopped trembling. Her voice, just slightly, steadied. Why are you telling me this? Because you remind me of who I was. Before I remembered what I was worth. I hired her that day. Not out of pity, out of recognition. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor bloomed. She arrived early, stayed late, knew every residence. Name within the first week, brought extra cookies on Fridays, helped calm a woman with dementia by singing lullabies from the 1960s, taught a shy new nurse how to mend a tear in a uniform with invisible stitching. And then, one evening, I saw her standing by the garden with another staff member, a girl, barely 20, crying quietly. Eleanor had one hand on the girl's back, rubbing slow circles. Not saying much, just being there. The next day, the girl showed up with less mascara and more confidence. That's when I knew Eleanor wasn't just surviving. She was already passing it on. One Friday morning, I walked into the break room with a clipboard. All staff were present, our monthly circle check-in. Some called it Patricia's ritual, but I never cared. I want to read something, I said. I held up a framed printout of a quote, the same one that had hung in my office since the beginning. Revenge isn't loud. It's success whispered in the halls of the people who once doubted you. Everyone looked around. Some smiled. Some nodded. And then I added, but now, I think we can go further. I turned to the whiteboard and wrote in bold black ink, we are the place they never saw coming. Not just for the residents, but for the staff, the forgotten, the late bloomers, the ones who were never handed power but built it from the scraps. Months passed. Silver Meadows became more than a facility. It became a movement. We launched a second site in Portland, another in Spokane, each one led by women who had been written off somewhere somehow, and who now held clipboards, keys, and decision-making power. We called it the Blooming Circle, a quiet network. No PR blitz, no investor shows, just results, and people noticed. Women emailed from all over the country, sharing their stories, asking for advice, wanting to know if there was a place for them too. And we said yes. Always yes. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that revenge doesn't always come in fire and fury. Sometimes it comes in the form of one more woman getting a second chance. Years from now, they may not remember my name. They may not remember the Wilsons or Clarion or even the scandal. But they will remember what we built. They will walk through a hallway like this one, somewhere in some quiet town, and meet a woman in her 50s or 60s with soft eyes and steel in her spine, and they'll trust her without knowing why. And that, to me, is victory. Not loud, not flashy, but permanent. Like roots. Like legacy. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning that smelled like fresh coffee and wet earth. I was sitting by the window of my small cottage on the edge of town, the one I moved into after stepping down as director. Not retired, not really, just letting others lead now. I had just finished reading the obituaries, a habit you pick up when you've lived long enough to outlast a few generations. When the mail slot clicked, a single envelope slid through. No, return address. No handwriting I recognized. I opened it. Inside was a letter. Dear Patricia, you probably don't remember me. My name is Henry Wilson. I was 5 the last time I saw you. I remember your laugh. I remember the dinosaur pancakes. And I remember that one time you stayed up all night holding my hand when I had the flu. My parents told me you had to leave, that you stole something. But I didn't believe them. I'm older now. I've gone through a few things of my own. Betrayals, losses, the kind of things that make you think about who really mattered. I recently found out the truth about what happened, about you. I read an article, I cried. I'm sorry. I wish I had the words to make up for what my family did. I know I can't. But I wanted you to know. I remember. And I'm grateful. I hope wherever you are, you're happy. You deserved so much more than what you got back then. But I see now. You made more for yourself anyway. Thank you. Henry, I stared at the letter for a long while. Then I folded it carefully, slid it into a small box where I kept the other things that mattered. My staff badge, the original Silver Meadows floor plan, and a photo of Eleanor on her first day, as regional manager. I didn't need to reply. The past had finally found its own voice, and the future, it was already in good hands.